afternoon, everyone. My name is Kari Achatz, and I am a visual artist. I have a pretty untraditional background. I started out as an art ed major. I'm going into my 10th year of teaching right now. I always considered myself a painter, and for a really long time I felt stuck and confined in that until I started exploring myself as an artist. So I have done installation work, and my true love that I have found over the last 15 years is really photography. So for me, it was kind of blending my love of color and pattern and places and objects that I have an affinity for with photography. So I'm currently working in this medium that I describe as photo sculpture. It's not quite a collage, it's not quite a sculpture. That might not even be the correct term, but for me, that's what I feel comfortable calling it. So I'll talk to you a little bit about the technique that I work with first, and then I'll go into a little bit about why these places and spaces. So I go into places that I feel really drawn to. I feel like sometimes people have forgotten about them or view them in a negative way. And I start with a high contrast black and white image. For me, it's about removing the color so that I can really focus on shape, form, and content. So all of the pieces that you see in here are hand cut with different size, style, X-Acto knives. When I'm cutting, I'm not working on the front of the image, I work from the back of the image. So the first thing I do when I choose the image that I'm going to work with is I block out the high contrast areas. So for this one, I may have just made a shape like that, and I knew that this was the area I wanted to cut in. So I'm working from the back of the photograph. So when I'm cutting, I'm purely working with design, shape, form. How does it fit together? Do I need a space that's more geometric? Do I need a space that's more organic? This is actually the 11th piece in this photo sculpture series that I started about the central terminal and the grain silos. And this one is the most organic. So when I first started cutting these out, I stayed very confined, and they were very geometric and everything fit very perfectly. But as I started creating them, I noticed that a lot of the images that I were drawn to had these ideas of man creating things, nature taking over, and nature winning. So there needed to be more organic shapes within the work. So I cut those and I move. I'll usually start in one corner and it'll flow as I work. Then there are different areas in here where I will cut and I'll score, and those are the pieces that come forward. So the image is really interesting when you get close, because as you move and you see the different areas that are popped open, you see more of the image that's underneath. The image that's underneath is also a photograph. It does start to look a little bit like a painting, so it's a little bit of a trick. But it is a photograph, and the colors that are underneath are colors that are removed within the spaces that I am photographing. So usually it's a piece of graffiti that I feel really drawn to, or a color that's been left, or a paint that's multi-layered, that kind of man has painted, nature's removed, man has painted again, nature's removed, and I'm really drawn to the textures. So it is a double layer photograph. For these images that I've been working on with the grain silos and the central terminal, these are very prominent images. You can find a lot of photographs about them, but for me, I wanted to give my viewer a new take on them. So for me, it was about the manipulation with my hands on the actual images, and this idea that it can be something more. Buffalo has definitely started revitalizing in some of those areas, but the images that I'm using are in the areas that have not been touched at all, are probably not going to be touched. So it's not, the grain silos at Riverworks, they're the grain silos down by Tift, or it's the part of the central terminal where the trains used to go through, not the area where they're restoring and putting the clocks back in. So this idea that we're building these grand things and we're forgetting about them, and ultimately, nature always wins. So when I started this piece, like I said, it's the most organically shaped one that I have done to date. I originally was like, I had this idea for this color that went behind it, and there was a lot of greens because of all of the organic shapes. But when I started playing with the colors that went behind it, the greens started looking really toxic. And I was like, oh, well, that's not really what I want the viewer to see. I want them to see brightness and hope. So I do play around a lot with the colors that end up going behind them. You know, my reds are more dramatic, blues are a little more mellow. So depending on the ultimate vibe that I want you to feel from this space, that's the color that I choose. And I try to help the viewer see some of the feelings that I felt when I was there. So like I found this place to be very calming to me. This idea that there, you know, nature is taken over. There's this doorway, what's behind it, and what's there. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you so much. Thank you.